Hey everybody, welcome to the Josh Peak Show. Today we have Kerry McDonald, and Kerry, I've interviewed Kerry before, and it's exciting to have her back on. Hey Kerry, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing excellent. Just to give you a little background on Kerry, she's senior fellow at FEE, Adjunct Scholar at CATO Institute, and author of Unschooled. I got that right?
That's right. Yes.
Well, good. So what's new with FEE? I mean, what all's been going on? I know there's been, since the last time we've talked, we live in a little bit different environment today than we did then.
Yeah.
So kind of give us an update on what's been going on with you and FEE and some of the things with, I think we're starting to see more and more people go to homeschooling or unschooling for sure, pulling their kids out of the public schools, it looks like. So kind of give us an update.
Yeah. So I guess the big news this year with FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, is it's our 75th year anniversary. We're founded in 1946 by Leonard Read and are currently the oldest libertarian think tank in the country. So that's what a year to be celebrating such an anniversary and sort of pushing against lockdown policies and kind of centralization of power in response to the pandemic. And FEE's really been on the forefront in opposing lockdowns and highlighting the trade-offs that exist with some of these public policy approaches really since March of 2020. So it's been great to be part of that team. And then with me and FEE over the past a couple of months, I've been working on a new ebook that was just published this week. It's free. It's called The 2021 Curious Parents Guide to Education Options. And it really brings together a lot of the content that I've been writing and speaking about over the past year in a real current way. So thinking right now as parents look to back to school 2021 or not back to school 2021 as a more likely scenario for many parents, this really provides all kinds of different options and possibilities so that parents realize that they have choices beyond their assigned district school, more choices than they may think, even though we still have a long road to go in terms of implementing education choice policies, although that's accelerated over the past year. There are still some other choices that parents can make in terms of homeschooling, learning pods, micro schools, really high quality virtual learning options, not this district Zoom schooling that many parents had to deal with this year. Creating your own learning pod and pursuing education entrepreneurship. So all kinds of possibilities. And I think that it's really going to be top of mind for parents, particularly now. We can talk a little bit about this, but the CDC just this morning came out with their recommendations for back to school for 2021. And they are saying that all unvaccinated students should be masked, which is a good chunk of the overall school age population, considering the vaccine is not yet available to kids under 12, and a lot of kids over 12 aren't getting this vaccine. So there will be masks in schools. And in fact, an Associated Press article I read about this said that basically schools are going to have a hard time determining who's vaccinated and who isn't on a daily basis to sort of reinforce these mask requirements. And so this article indicated, well, we'll probably just have everybody wear a mask then. Social distancing still recommended now 3 feet instead of 6 feet, but still social distancing, frequent virus testing. So I think parents are saying, gosh, this year really is going to be as uncertain and as unsettling as last year. And we're just going to opt out entirely for something different.
Yeah, so that was kind of, as you're talking, there was two things that popped in my mind. Number one, I feel sorry for these teachers, really. That's who I feel sorry for. I mean, their job is, I couldn't do it. I mean, there's no way, first of all, they can't really teach. Second of all, it's what they're told to teach. But then you have this, to where you have to, who's vaccinated, who's not. I mean, how are they going to tell who's vaccinated or not? I guess that's the big question. What are they going to, are they going to make them have vaccination cards? Are they going to, I don't know how they expect to do this,
Yeah, well, as I said, this Associated Press article said it's going to be a big headache, and that's why they expect that many schools will simply just say no masks for everybody. There will be masks for everyone because it'll be really difficult on a daily basis to determine who is and who isn't vaccinated. So, I think, again, this year's back to school season is looking really as ominous as last, and similar to last year when so many parents exited the public school system. I think we'll see that continuing trend, particularly now as it's becoming clearer what the fall will look like. And I think a lot of parents, in fact, one of my recent articles about, 4 reasons why, or 4 signs of parents choosing not to send their kids back to school this year. One of those signs was that there was in Palm Beach County, Florida, they had one of the largest drops in public school enrollment for homeschooling last academic year. And the parents indicated there that their main reason for choosing homeschooling was that they didn't want their kids in masks all day. And Palm Beach County said, this was before the CDC announcement, so it may change, but as of when I wrote this article a couple of weeks ago, Palm Beach County said they weren't going to require masks for those kids. But the parents still said, you know what, we're going to continue homeschooling. It's working out well for us. I think there's also really increased concerns over curriculum. There were, in this particular school district that I highlighted, there was an equity statement that came out that had some divisive language focused on critical race theory that a lot of parents disagreed with. And so for those reasons, kind of combined with ongoing pandemic response, deciding to stay outside of the district school.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives down in that area. I don't know if it's the same district you're talking about, but she was running for Congress, lost her race, but there was her and a bunch of different moms that were letting the schools know they weren't real happy with the mask because they had already taken the mask mandate off Florida, but the schools were still making them wear them. It was a huge thing. The other thing I was thinking about is kind of talk about what a pod is for those people who may be watching or listening. Because this podcast is on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere else, but then also we have a streaming live right now. But for those who are watching or listening, kind of educate people on what a pod is and how that works.
Yeah, so a learning pod, or the term pandemic pod that became popular in 2020, is really a modern twist on sort of a time-honored homeschool co-op that's been around since the dawn of the modern homeschooling era. It's also very similar in many ways to the kind of burgeoning microschool movement that was gaining traction prior to the pandemic and has also accelerated over the past year. But essentially what these are in-home or home-based learning communities, typically multi-age, replicating in many cases sort of the one-room schoolhouse of yesteryear, typically with a hired teacher or facilitator, although in some cases parents might take turns leading the pod or facilitating a curriculum in a pod during the week. It's typically at one parent's home or, again, alternating homes, similar to homeschool co-ops. Sometimes they might occur in commercial spaces or nonprofit organizations, but what we saw really over the last year was these were, in or home-based programs. And a lot of families like them. In fact, there was some research suggesting that parents were actually willing to pay more than a lot of teachers were currently charging to run these pods. So there's a market opportunity there. And I think a lot of educators, similar to what you were saying before, you feel bad for the educators, a lot of educators are realizing that there's some real market opportunities here for their services and their skills, and they could jump ship to either start kind of a pod network or get teamed up with a family that's looking to have a learning-based pod. I think of the education startup GetSchoolhouse.com that just raised several $1 million in an initial investment round from a venture capital firm that pairs families looking for these pods with a certified teacher. So there's clearly, some real opportunities here, and something that I think is ultimately going to really shake up education for the long term.
Well, it really needs it. I mean, I feel like the system in itself is such a broken model. I think the pandemic was one of the worst things it was one of the worst things for public schooling in a way. I mean, to me, it shined light on on what a broken system it is. And I think things are going to change in a big way,
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing parents are always looking at probably is they wonder, are they capable of doing it themselves? And then number two, can they afford to do it? Those are two of the bigger things that when I talk to people, that's really what it is. So, what do you say to that? I mean, because I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things going on. First, I will say that the homeschool population pre-pandemic was typically had lower income on average than the overall school population, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't think of. They think, oh, homeschooling is somehow connected to privilege or affluence, and actually the opposite is true. In fact, the New York Times acknowledged this in an article talking about homeschooling at the beginning of last academic year, and then Education Week came out with a survey of homeschooling families or of school-age families last November, and they found that by their homeschooling estimates, homeschooling had doubled, which is consistent with other data as well. And they found that most of the families driving that surge were lower income or lower income than average families. So that's, again, kind of continuing with the trend that homeschoolers tend to be less affluent on average than the typical school community. And so it shows that this can be done, and in fact is a real option for a lot of families. These pods, I think, are a great example of that, where you can connect with other families to create these learning communities. You could have sliding scale or chip in, varying amounts based on willingness or ability to pay. You could then also rely on parent resources, as the educator or the facilitator themselves. A lot of free online learning resources available, like I think of Khan Academy, which is sort of the leader in online learning, free online learning videos for kids, particularly well known for their math programming. So there's just a lot more resources than families might be aware of, and I think that they're recognizing that over the past year, that they do have other choices and other options available to them.
Yeah, LinkedIn Learning is another one that I think is phenomenal for kids, especially getting into the teenage years and whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think LinkedIn Learning is perfect, because I think when you go through LinkedIn Learning, once you complete, a course or whatever, you get certified, or you get a certification.
And LinkedIn Learning, that was formerly Lynda.
It was,
is that right? So LinkedIn Learning is available for free through a lot of public library systems.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know for us here, I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that's the case, and also other major library systems across the country. If you go to your library website and click on digital resources or e-library or whatever the link is for you, you can often log in and get access to that for free. It's a tremendous resource.
It's an awesome resource. Yeah, I remember when it was Lynda. I actually used it, and my wife did for photography and for some other things. But now it's LinkedIn Learning, because what a great concept! I wish I'd have come up with that one. But the other thing is, I love the concept of unschooling. I like where things are going, but I think for high school athletes, that's always been another hurdle. You and I have talked before about the Tebow bill.
Yeah.
Again, in Oklahoma, they wanted to try to pass it. Like 30 some other states have passed it, but Oklahoma hasn't. And I think what it comes down to in Oklahoma is there is we're pretty lax on homeschooling laws. We're kind of the Wild West, and there's a lot of people who live here because of homeschooling. With that being said, there's a contingent of homeschooling parents that when that bill comes up, the first thing they think about is, well, now if that passes, they're going to be able to tell us how we are going to homeschool, what curriculum we're going to use. And it's not like that at all. Really, the Tebow bill is a concept that it's an opt-in bill or an opt-out. And so if you want to keep homeschooling the way you're homeschooling, well, then that's just fine. But if you want the district you live in, well, now we have an open transfer rule too that kind of goes into play. So whatever school you go to, I think there is, well, I know in fact there is a criteria you got to meet if you're gonna homeschool and participate in athletics. It's not a strict criteria, but the way I look at it is, if you're paying that money in, it's kind of like what Corey DeAngelis talks about, the money should follow the parents or the student and not the system.
Right.
So if you're paying that money in, I don't understand the big deal of, having a T-Bow bill. I think it's the right thing to have, but we have a small but powerful contingent of homeschooling families in Oklahoma. Once that comes up, they're down in Oklahoma City at the Capitol, and it always gets shut down every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's understandable. It's also, I think, related to the pushback that some homeschoolers have toward expanding education choice policies to homeschoolers to allow, for example, education savings accounts to be accessible to homeschoolers. And I think you're right that as long as it stays an opt-in program, it should be fine. And then it's expanding choices for more families. So spend the time pushing against any possible regulation down the road that would limit homeschooling freedoms, but encourage these policies because they may bring more homeschoolers into the community. And I think that there is, promise in numbers, right? There's strength in numbers. So, but it is true that in some states that have passed the Tim Tebow bill or similar kinds of bills that allow homeschooled students to participate in district sports, those students who do choose to participate do need to comply with the local school district requirements, maybe standardized testing or various curriculum requirements, student immunizations, and so on. So there is that piece, but again, it's opt-in, and it isn't something that extends to the overall homeschooling community. Again, I understand the concern that it could, but my recommendation, and I've written about this in a policy paper for CATO as well, is to encourage the expansion of choice to homeschoolers, and then fight any regulation down the road.
Yeah, I think that's a good route. For people that are wanting to get resources, where would they go to get your resources? What is your fee link? What is that?
So if you go to fee.org/Kerry, Kerry, you'll see a link to all of my recent articles. You'll see a link to my new ebook, which will have, again, is free for download, which will have lots of updated information for you as you think about back to school plans this year. Can connect with all of my social media accounts, send me an email, and sign up for my weekly email newsletter as well. So that's fee.org/Kerry.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on. This is a little bit of a shorter interview, but for folks that's interested, you're wanting to go to the homeschooling or unschooling route, as Kerry would say, and I would recommend picking her book up as well. But as far as resources, I've always followed her. And I think that's the biggest part for most people is finding the resources, knowing what to do, where to go. I think that's the biggest question is, where do we even start? And a lot of times, if you live in a public school situation area, it's not like they're going to go and help you go that route.
Yeah, if I could just say sort of 2 words on that as well. If you're looking specifically for homeschooling resources over the coming year, the best place to begin is probably your local community. So local Facebook groups, you could search in Facebook, for example, for your local area and homeschooling and see what pops up. Other kinds of social networks for homeschoolers in your local area. And I think that could be a good gateway for you for parents who are thinking about this, into finding other resources, finding co-ops and learning pods or micro school networks. To start there. And then, from there, really figure out what is going to be the best fit for your kids, over the coming year. Is it going to be, a district school where they're wearing masks all day and socially distancing, or is it something a little bit different? And now there may be, some more possibilities available.
Yeah, and that brings up just one last question before we're done here. What are you seeing in kids that unschool? When it comes time for college, are colleges, are they wanting, unschool kids, homeschool kids, whatever? Are they seeking that out? Are they looking for that? And I mean, are they seeing kids that are having success in colleges, that have been unschooled? Are you seeing, what do you see in that?
Yeah, Business Insider a couple of years ago had an article about how homeschooling is the smartest way to teach kids in the 21st century. They also had an article about how, Harvard is in particular seeking out homeschooled kids. The Harvard Gazette has done profiles of some of their homeschooling students. And other colleges as well. In fact, many colleges and universities now have special admission areas on their website for homeschoolers, recognizing they're going to have a different academic background and experience, and sort of building in a platform to acknowledge that and to embrace that. And many colleges and universities realize that this unique experience that homeschoolers have, the fact that they are able to pursue their interests and really dig deep into specific interests or content areas, that's a real asset for colleges and universities. Often homeschoolers have a real zest for learning and a real curiosity and creativity that conventionally schooled kids may not have. And so that's another reason why they can be sought after by colleges and universities today.
So in your resource page or your area there, do you have somewhere where, parents can go if they need to build a transcript, for example, for the college? Do you have a place that shows how to do that, or do you know of a place that can show that?
I don't have it on my website, but it is something that you could enter into a search engine. Yeah. Homeschool transcripts. There are companies that do that, organizations that do that. Many homeschoolers decide to take community college classes, for example, during the teen years, so that can build up a transcript that in many cases is then transferable into a college or university. So it saves quite a bit of money for parents thinking about how to pay for college when their kids as teenagers, instead of getting a high school diploma, are getting an associate's degree from a community college or working towards a degree program, and then being able to transfer in as a sophomore or junior to a four-year institution. That saves a lot of money, particularly because a lot of states have dual enrollment policies where high school age students, including homeschoolers, are able to take these community college classes for a fraction of the price that they would be if you were enrolling as a post, high school student. So there's some real opportunities for savings there and for building up transcripts. There's also some great, online high school age program for teenagers if teenagers are looking for more of that academic piece. But a lot of these transcript resources can find ways to sort of capture some of the extracurricular activities that kids are doing and demonstrate how that is, relevant in terms of academic areas.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time too. I think we see more. Well, I would think we would see more unschooling kids. I think we would see more of those go more the entrepreneurial route as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we may have talked about this. I do mention it in my Unschooled book, that there was some research on grown unschoolers. These would be kids who have homeschooled, but have homeschooled in more of a unstructured, informal way, really tied to their interests and talents, as opposed to kind of traditional school-at-home versions of homeschooling. And so in that survey of grown unschoolers that was conducted by Peter Gray, who's a psychology professor at Boston College, an unschooling advocate who wrote the foreword to my Unschooled book, he and his colleague Gina Riley found that the grown unschoolers that they surveyed, more than half of them were working as entrepreneurs in fields that were connected to interests that they developed as children or adolescents, because they had that time and that freedom and that flexibility to do that.
That's awesome. Well, Kerry, I appreciate it again. I appreciate you coming on, and I'd like to bring you on from time to time. I think there's a huge demand for what you teach and what you talk about. Obviously, I watch you on Facebook, and these parents are curious. I don't think, as a whole, I don't think parents are happy with the product that they're getting in terms of the taxes that they're having to pay in to get it. And they just don't really know. A lot of them just don't know what direction to go. So my recommendation would be to follow her page, Kerry's page there at FEE, and then as well as her social media accounts as well. A lot of great resources. And again, I appreciate you coming on, Kerry.
Oh, always good to be with you, Josh. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. You have a good day.